Welcome to The Crunch with Crib Creative. I'm Jess, and each week we're going to be diving into the stories of some of Perth's best agents and business people, how they got where they are, and what they learned along the way. Nat Hoye is one of the top selling agents in Inglewood and sets herself apart by being an active member of the local community. Blogging and managing her lifestyle website and social media channels, Beaufort and beyond, Nat is the embodiment of a local agent who has embraced digital media. I wanted to chat to her about her online presence and how social media has changed her sales strategy. Welcome, Nat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So to kick things off, I guess I wanted to talk to you about your social media presence because you have recently made some pretty large changes to it.
Yeah, we have.
So how would you define your brand?
It's a really good question, Jess. And as I guess part of changing our social media presence, we had to have a really good, long, hard think about, who we were and how we wanted to appear online. But we wanted that online appearance to be really authentic, obviously. Mm-hmm. That's really important. But also to be clear about who we were speaking to. So I guess first and foremost, we're local. I'm a local agent. I live in Inglewood. I, renovated and owned houses all throughout the local area, Inglewood, Dianella, Mount Lawley, and beyond. So very much first and foremost local. I live local. Kids go to school locally. We very much try and support local businesses and live a local lifestyle. So it was very much about that. Mm-hmm. Second was that, really needed to be authentic. And, people always talk, and it's a funny word, but people always talk about, that I'm nice. Oh, I saw your photo on the sign. You look really nice. And I do think one of the things that come out is that we are very approachable and very friendly. So we wanted, that to come across. The third is, I guess, classic but with a quirky twist. So, that's kind of how I like to dress. It's kind of how I like to be. My house is probably that just by virtue of the fact I can't spend more time on it, so there's a little bit of eccentricity and quirkiness kind of there. And I guess I've always been slightly maverick and not a one sort of size fits all. So, that comes out. Fourth is, I guess we really pride ourselves on, I think, being intelligent and savvy in terms of what we do, being smart about the market, smart about the direction the market's heading in, understanding what buyers are looking for, and ensuring that the strategies that we're putting together for selling properties are smart and they're going to get the results. So savvy, I think, is really important. Mm-hmm. And the last one is very much around, I guess, generosity. I've been blessed to have wonderful people in my life as mentors and coaches and providing me with a lot of support throughout my career, and we try very hard to be that with our clients as well. Like if people are not selling but they're just looking for great advice and help in terms of making a decision, we're so happy to do that. So it's a lot about giving back too.
Yeah. And so when you were putting together your social media strategy, what were the most important things for you to get across?
Well, obviously the values were important, and also ensuring that, what we're doing is actually of interest, that people are engaging with it. But the other thing was we really didn't want a cookie cutter approach. We wanted to make sure that it looked like us and that people connected with us and that it felt like us and it was authentic and it was our voice. Yeah.
That's so important with social media, that people don't think they're just talking to someone who's managing a page. That's or that it is coming from you.
Yeah. So. And we had seen what we thought was a bit of that, and that was really what we didn't want. I mean, I think it takes a little bit more effort. But the rewards are there.
Yeah. Definitely. How has obviously the market has been pretty challenging in the last couple of years. How have you changed your strategy to succeed in this kind of market?
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on that. A lot of it just comes down to working harder, honestly. I think, and this is a conversation we have in the office a lot, in that we have to work very, very hard to get the same results that we were getting a few years ago. We've always prided ourselves on our ability to put a deal together and to work with buyers and sellers to facilitate an outcome, but you've got to work even harder at that now. You really need to do, houses absolutely do not sell themselves in this market, and that's just what it is. And it's not so much a change of strategy, but I think the work that we do with sellers in helping them get their property ready for sale is particularly important. It's the kind of market where buyers have been rewarded for waiting and not making buying decisions, and they're able to cherry pick from the best of what's available. In some areas that we sell in, there can be, a lot of oversupply of particular kinds of product. So how a property presents is really important, and obviously the pricing strategy and all of that is too. So you've just got to be really on the ball with all of that, in terms of helping, people to go to market and to sell well. And we've embraced a lot more no price marketing in order to try and widen buyer pools. We're certainly not the approach that we use for everything, but we have found that has worked particularly well, because we know with property that different buyers can look at the same property and have a different opinion on price. And we're always geared towards, how do we find the best buyer that's prepared to pay the most amount of money in the current market conditions. And so for some property, a no price marketing strategy has been very much the way for us to go to achieve that outcome. But basically, you just have to work hard.
Very hard. We've been saying that a lot lately. It's just, there's no replacement for hard work for a real estate agent.
Not at all. No.
What do you think you do differently to other agents?
Yeah, again, a really good question, and something that I've thought a lot about. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's not one thing; it's a lot of different things. So, and it's that kind of combination of those lots of different things. And I think it's lots of kind of 1 and 10%ers. So we're constantly looking at what can we do better or differently to other agents. We don't manage a massive portfolio of listings, and I've taken a very deliberate approach not to do that, so that we can be very hands-on and proactive in the way that we sell. My days on market are particularly low compared to competition and the Perth average. So in over the last sort of 7 years, they've been between sort of 27 and 31. They kind of hover around that sort of 30 market, give or take. Whereas the current Perth average is 70, and mine has pretty much remained unchanged, because I think we're just very focused on trying to do what we do particularly well. So we're always looking at how we can do better on presentation. That's been really important. How we can do better on pricing strategy, how we can better promote property. How do we be better and sharper on our selling process? And even if that just means we're working 10% or more, probably harder than other agents in terms of nurturing the buyers, doing the work with the buyers, trying to bring them to the table, how we negotiate, how we work with sellers. It's kind of all of those things, Jess, I think. Yeah.
Do you prefer to list or to sell?
I like both. I like both. There is nothing like the buzz of winning a really fabulous listing that you've gone into that property and you think, oh my God, I love this. And going through that process and being able to represent that client and knowing that you've got that listing, for me, that's still a huge buzz. That said, I'm not fond of what I call the beauty pageant aspect of listing, when they're calling in, 3 or 5 agents to come and do a pitch for a property. Because I won't be the cheapest and I won't be the highest price. And it really breaks my heart when I see sellers go with agents that have promised them a price that's not in line with where the market is going to reasonably see value. Don't get me wrong, we're always trying to get the highest price that we can. But it just breaks my heart when I see people go to market and then sitting there for months and not getting the result and knowing that they're going to end up with a worse outcome. But that's what it is, and that aspect of our business will never go away. And when it comes to selling, I don't think you can ever get tired from the satisfaction of really putting a deal together. And if you do, you're in the wrong business, because you really need to love that.
And that's the payoff.
And that's the payoff. For us as agents, but also for the seller. Particularly if you can really surprise and delight them with the result that you bring. That's and then that seller's getting to move on with their life, and that's fabulous.
One of the things I've been asking all of the guests who come on this podcast is how they got to where they are.
Yeah.
And I know that you are someone, like a lot of agents, who's come from a different industry.
Yeah.
Can you give just a bit of a background on where you've come from?
Yeah, sure. Look, I kind of... I did particularly well at school, but then I was a bit of a girly swat, but left much to the horror and disgust of school and my family, left when I was about 15 because I really wasn't clear about what I wanted to do with my life. Went and worked in a bank, big mistake. But anyway, it was a really good grounding in customer service and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. When I was in my mid-20s, I was fortunate enough to get a position at Curtin Uni. I was working in training and development for a financial services organisation, and was able to secure a spot at Curtin Uni in a postgrad training and development course, and that went particularly well. So I went on and did my master's in commerce in HR. And as soon as we finished that, it had always been my ambition to travel. So, you know, by that stage, David had been on the scene for a while. He just got dragged along. He had the British passport. So we spent 4 years living and working in London, and I got for want of a better word, internal consulting job for SAP, which was a global IT company. So I travelled a lot to Germany and, you know, chatted to people all over the world, and did a lot of troubleshooting and worked on lots of projects and, you know, kind of a lot of negotiation and facilitation and, you know, that kind of stuff in order to sort things out and, you know, get better outcomes for the business. I had my first son, Daniel, who's now 15, over there in London, and we headed back to Perth. And then when he was about sort of 7 months old, you know, went back, set up my own consultancy and went back and did a variety of things part-time. So I was doing some post-grad lecturing at Curtin, I was doing some training, I was doing some consulting, business coaching, management coaching, kind of a whole range of things. And then when we were selling for the upteenth time, and I guess property and real estate have always been my passion and my hobby. Since I was a little girl, I used to love going to display homes. You know, I would always pop into home opens. I was the go-to girl. You know, when property used to be advertised in the paper, I knew everything that was on the market, pretty much what everything was selling for. And when we were selling for the upteenth time, and my very bad joke is better houses than husbands.
Probably true.
Yeah, it's probably true. They probably cost as much, but anyway, I've given the government a lot of money in stamp duty. But when we were selling for the upteenth time, we downsized our mortgage a little bit, and it gave me the opportunity to, think about, you know, making a career change. And the agents that were selling our homes said, oh, for God's sake, Nat, you should just come and work with us. And that's what I did, and I haven't looked back. Wow. I mean, the irony is I work more hours now than I've ever worked in my life, but I love it. And I find it incredibly more rewarding than anything else I've ever done. It's a real privilege to walk with people through the process of a sale. It really is, because it can be a very emotional time for people. There can be some really tricky circumstances, and even if they're moving to move towards something exciting, they're giving up something that they know to go to something that they don't. So I love it.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely love it.
What do you think was some of the main things that you brought from your previous roles into real estate?
Yeah, look, I think consulting and in terms of what I did before, it's a lot about diagnosis. It's a lot about asking questions. It's a lot about understanding what the issues and concerns are for people and what they're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And then it's about being able to put forward solutions to do that. Mm-hmm. And if you don't diagnose and understand the need and the problem, you're not going to be putting forward the right solution. So I do believe very much in that kind of question-based approach to an appraisal. So that's sort of asking versus telling. And similarly in consulting, I think you really learn to evaluate and constantly evaluate what you're doing. So you think very strategically about what you think is going to deliver the best solution to the problem and get the result that's needed. Mm-hmm. So I think you're very good at understanding, you know, what's going on in the market and who your competition is and, you know, where you need to be positioned to get the result. But I think you're very good at also evaluating the results, so that you're thinking about, how's the campaign performing? Are we attracting the right buyers? Are we sort of targeting the right audience? What needs to change in order for the result to change? So you're constantly evaluating that. And also you've automatically you're used to having feedback loops, with your client as well, to talk about what's going on and to give them good information so that they can make good decisions, So but realizing, in consulting, you realize that it's it's not your business, and it's the same thing. It's not my house. So I'm just there trying to give the client the right information to help them make the best decision to get the outcome that it is that they're looking for.
Yeah. And what about since you've started real estate, what do you think, what's the biggest thing you've learned since starting real estate?
When I looked at that question, I think I wrote down 20 things, and I thought, no, Jess just wants one. Just wants one goal. What's the one? I think, and I would say this is not just real estate, this is life. I very much learnt to trust in the process, that if you do the work, the results will come. If you come from the right space and the right heart and the right intent, and you just do the work, focus on the process and trust the process, and the outcome will happen.
That's such a good lesson for any industry, anyone in any role, kind of sales role, I guess, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Now, we recently had you at Ari Bar Camp.
Yes.
And your topic was Sell Like a Girl.
Yes.
And I asked this to Carmel Gardner from Ava McGrath last week, and she didn't agree with me, but I tend to think that real estate is probably an industry that's still fairly male dominant. So I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. Look, if it was interesting. I went to ARIC a couple of weeks ago. And the initial way I wanted to respond to this question was to say, it still is. And there are some aspects that are, and I'll kind of touch on some of that. But what I loved about ARIC this year was the number of female speakers that were there. And I think as an industry, we really need to continue to foster and encourage women's voices, because there are women that do absolutely fabulous work. We've got a long track record in this industry of women who've been real trailblazers, but we haven't necessarily given them the voice. And 6 years ago, when I went to my first ARIC, I don't think there was one single female speaker.
Yeah, right.
So to go from that to the most recent one, where there was a lot of women on the bill, I really thought was fabulous. And I don't need to listen to the polished male, guy presenter that's coming up that's very slick. I like voices that are authentic. So it was great to have those, some of those women on stage, and to hear about their personal journeys and stories and what works for them. And those stories felt very real to me. So that was great. I found that really encouraging. But I do find, there's a level of chauvinism, and I don't just think it's an industry thing. I actually think it's a societal thing. I mean, if you look at the abuse that Lucy Zelich just copped recently for her World Cup coverage, because she's trying to pronounce, be respectful and pronounce players' names correctly. I mean, Les Murray did that for years, and no one ever copped any criticism. So I do think there's this. I do think there's still a level of chauvinism that exists in our society about women and women doing well and trying to do well. And I think, women do try on the whole to do exceptionally well. We're girly swats, and sometimes that holds us back because we don't have the level of confidence. And there's a lot of really good evidence, certainly, that sits in the HR space about interviewing and people putting themselves forward for jobs, in that. And it's a generalisation, but as a whole, women won't put themselves forward for a position unless they think they can pretty much 100% do it.
Yeah.
But that's not the same for men. They'll look at it, and if they meet 70% of the criteria, they'll think they'll have a go. That kind of thing. So there is that real need for women, I think, to kind of lean in a bit more and have the confidence. But I do think there is that sometimes kind of chauvinistic view that women aren't hard enough, and that to negotiate successfully you have to be aggressive. And I built a very successful consulting career, and doing a lot of work when I worked overseas, having to work with lots of different countries and different nationalities to negotiate and facilitate outcomes. there's a lot of different ways to get very successful outcomes. And sometimes those kind of overly, more overly aggressive and sort of bullying approaches, and I'm not, please, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying men bully, but I'm just saying that there is a lot of different ways to negotiate and get outcomes, and that sometimes those more facilitative approaches aren't valued to the extent that they should be. I think we get fabulous results because buyers are not feeling like, sellers aren't feel bullied into selling or pushed into selling, and buyers the same thing. We're not scaring them off. We're trying to work with them, and I think sometimes we can actually get a bit more money by taking a different approach.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at things, and I think something people should take, women should take more, I guess, pride in being a little bit more consultative and a little bit softer in their approach. And
it's not to say all women are like that.
No,
there's some amazing female,
strong female
reps
absolutely.
in WA that I know of. It's
and certainly the other way around with men as well.
Absolutely, completely agree.
Yeah.
But we are in the majority of cases selling to women. The decision makers often with purchasing a home is with women, and sometimes I think that the mistake is made of selling towards the men because they might be a little bit more vocal, and but it's often the woman that's making the decision, and we need to kind of think about that and consider that.
What's been your toughest time in real estate?
Look, I still have tough times. It's a tough market, and you work really hard, and so I still have tough times. And I'm probably my own worst enemy. I'm very hard on myself, particularly if I lose a listing that I that I really wanted. I'm getting much better at accepting that I can't control what other people do, though, just myself. And I try and but it's a continual effort to kind of go, well, next, what can I learn from that? What can I do differently next time? I always ask for feedback. And think about what I can do differently next time, so that I don't do that. But look, I started in 2011, which was a declining market. It was a really crappy market. So I learned very quickly too that you can't control the market. The market is what it is. People will still need help selling, and people will still need help buying, and circumstances are still going to necessitate the sale and purchase of property, irrespective of market conditions. So you need to get over that, and just work and just focus on getting the outcome.
This is another question that I've asked a lot of our guests who have come in, but what's something that you come up against all the time, something that you believe that either your clients or colleagues don't agree with?
Overpricing. Overpricing. Oh, jeez, I hate overpricing. Look, I used to, one of the offices I worked in years ago, they used to say to me, Natalie, you sell property too quickly. You need more overpriced listings. You can't change the price on someone else's listing. And I did, and I still do. I still sell a lot of property really quickly. It was easier to do back then. I think my average, it was really low. But I won't do it. I can't do it. And it might be from a business perspective, it might be naive of me. And I've seen, competitors and other people in the industry build a market presence by taking on everything and consistently overpricing property and telling people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. But for me, that's kind of like, well, no wonder people don't trust us. And, obviously I don't get it right 100% of the time, but I really try to not get it wrong. And I guess the conversation I want to have with people is, look, I don't know what your property is going to sell for. I've got no idea. People even in this market can still pay fantastic properties for prices if we get the process right and we get everything lined up and the ducks in the row. But to me, that deliberate overpricing really smacks of putting your own needs and ego first and not the clients. And I cannot bring myself to to lie, and that's probably not the right word, but I just can't bring myself to do that. You know, if I, you know, I will talk about where the rational sales price is and the difference between that and the emotional and the premium price, and we're always going for that emotional and the premium price. But I do think, you know, you have to have the right conversation about where the actual comparable sales have been with a property. You know, if I've got a seller who, you know, wants to test the market at a particular price, but we've got agreement about what we're going to do if the feedback's not there, then that's a different story.
Yeah.
But to deliberately set out to miscommunicate where the market is likely to see value, you know, on a property when the sales evidence very strongly says otherwise, yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah.
And I can't do it.
Would you see much of your stock coming from kind of star listings that have been sitting there at a really high?
No, we don't. And you know, and one of the things we probably should do is chase down a lot more of, you know, that stock that's been sitting on the market for a while. It's one of the things I talk about in terms of the sort of the follow-up from our systems and processes. But no, not really. Yeah, I've picked one up recently, but we don't deliberately go out to target that stock. I think I do. People understand that I get results, and so what sometimes I think, you know, you go, oh God, you know, like they've got another listing, how have they done that? You know, everything's so overpriced, can people not see it? But people do.
Yeah.
Because you'll go to a listing appointment and people will say, you know, Natalie, we saw the result that you got on, you know, X, and like we thought that was amazing. Or, you know, we heard that you got 95 groups of buyers and 5 offers, you know, for that property, and we couldn't believe the price. And that's, you know, in current market conditions, and, you know, we want the same. And you think, okay, so people, it might be more subtle, and they do see it, but, you know, sometimes you think, you know, what, really? How the hell? And then you think, okay, that's all right, that'll just make X easier to sell, you know, because I'll get all the buyers, you know. So yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about how the industry is changing, because obviously, you know, with the increase in the way agents are embracing social media is something that's been huge in the last couple of years. Industry-wide changes such as the award that's just come in. You know, there's been a lot of sweeping changes. Purple bricks isn't, you know, something else that's been a bit disruptive. Yeah. I guess I wanted to get your opinion on how you see the industry changing in the next few years. Yeah, look,
you know, I think, you know, I guess for, you know, I've worked since I was 15. I'm now 48. You know, I've seen, you know, when I first started working, we had microfiche. You know, the world's changed. You know, the working world has changed extraordinarily since, you know, kind of, you know, I first joined it. Yeah. And I think that's just a given. And, you know, I've studied lots of organisations that no longer exist, you know, and they make fabulous, you know, organisational development and change management sort of case studies. You know, so I just think change is a given, and we're always going to have those disruptions, and we need to think as an industry about how we're going to step up to them. Look, I think the award changes is definitely going to see a rationalisation of the number of agents in the industry. I think that's a given. And I think there'll be a move towards people working more part of a selling team, rather than, you know, trying to go out on their own. I just don't think, you know, I don't think people understand how skinny margins in agencies are. Yeah. And that agencies just can't afford to take people on straight into sales roles and pay those salaries. So I think it will move towards people kind of doing, you know, kind of cadetships and coming up through teams, or having to start in admin roles and working their way through. I just think that's going to be how it happens. I'm really looking forward to seeing the industry move down that path of being a profession, having come from a professional background, you know, with you know, in roles where there are industry professions. I mean, you know, people don't go, who's the cheapest dentist, and they don't go, you know, who's the cheapest doctor. Well, maybe if you're going to get, you know, boob work done, but I don't, you know, but you're still, not. But you're still looking, you know, that, you know, people understand quality when they're choosing professions to help them. And I think real estate will benefit hugely from going down that path. I do think the barrier to entry in our industry being as low as it has been in the past hasn't always served our industry and our reputation and the level of result people have got from working with agents. So I think that's actually a really important step, and one that I'm really looking forward to. I think Purple Bricks has been a big flop in WA. From what I understand, that hasn't really taken off, because I don't think they've just been able to provide in this market, the level of result that's needed. I don't think I've seen one property listed by Purple Bricks, and there's not been many, through my areas in terms of Mount Lawley and Inglewood and Bedford, that has even sold, let alone sort of sold well. I think personally our biggest threats are going to come more from the likes of Open Agent and realestate.com.au, where they're using their online platforms to take and charge us for our leads. And I think that's really the biggest threat to us, is having to, those providers who are charging for leads. I think we're going to have to be a lot more savvy about our online presence, especially at individual agent level, not just agency level, so that we're attracting sellers directly rather than paying third parties to feed us. And the leads that we get are, generally of pretty poor quality, and to be expected to be paid, to have to pay for those as well. So I think we really need to think about how we're going to combat that as an industry. But I think that digital trends and disruption is just going to be a given. And that online world is very much here to stay, and we all need to learn how to play in that space.
Do you think real estate is an industry that moves quickly to change? You've obviously worked in different industries and studied.
I don't think any industry necessarily moves quickly to change. I think the world, when you look at organisations that are no longer with us, large organisations and large established industries typically only change when they absolutely have to.
When they're forced.
When they're absolutely forced to. When something's, and often then it's too late. So, there's a lot of, dead corporate bodies, and models, and it's usually something new that comes in that's disruptive, and it's often too late for that industry to change. And I think that's why it's so important to be focused on, what the disruptors are doing.
If you could speak to yourself 10 years ago, give yourself a message, what would it be?
I look, that's I think do what you love. I try very hard to say to my boys to follow their passion and to do what they love. Be brave. Have the guts to follow your dreams. And that very much, I think, I do believe the only failure is the failure to try. Sometimes the danger of having been successful in your life and having done well is that you're fearful of failure. And I think particularly if you've been successful, that fear of failure is probably your biggest threat, because you're used to doing well and doing what you do well, and when you're trying something new and you're stretching out of your comfort zone, it's you have to take that risk to fail.
You almost have more to lose.
You do. So you really kind of have to set that fear aside and just go for it. I mean, that's what stopped me from doing video for such a long time, until I just went,
everyone from doing video.
Just for goodness sake, just bloody do it. Do it. Just do it.
You can only get better.
Who gives a toss?
You
exactly. Absolutely. And then you can look back at your old stuff and refilm it because it was so crap. You know?
It's the same with this podcast. When we started this out, it was, no one might listen, and you just got to give it a go.
Who cares? Yeah. Do it anyway.
So, what about people starting out in the industry today? What would you say to those people?
Look, I think it's really important to find a good agency to work for. I think that work culture and environment and the level of support and training that you get is particularly important to be successful in this industry, and to be somewhere where you're being supported and coached and mentored. I think that's really important. I also think you need to find yourself good coaches and mentors outside of that business as well. And I've I've always been someone who has been very much tried to be focused on learning and, ongoing learning through my whole life. I love learning, I love knowledge, and I think it's really important to, but realise that you don't know it all. It was the Socrates, I remember very few quotes, but there's that sort of Socratic verse, wisest is she. I'm going to substitute the he for the she. Who knows? She does not know, So, to constantly seek advice from people and to take counsel and to look at what other people are doing and to learn from people that are successful. So I think it's better to be in an agency where, there's other people that are really working successfully that you can learn from. I don't think you're going to learn as... and that said, I'm saying that, and then I'm very conscious of, Jodie, who works in our office, who does fabulous work, and she's not interested in writing massive numbers. And I've learnt a lot from her. Yeah. So I just think that's about watching, it's about working with people who do good work. Yeah. Really good work. Yeah. In an agency that wants to do the right thing. I do think that work culture and the people that you're working with is really important. But in this market, and in real estate, you have to have the hustle. You really have to work hard. If you're not prepared to work hard, you're not going to get the results. And so much of our job is not complicated, but it's the grind. Yeah. And really doing the work and grinding it out, and that consistency and just repeatability. And I think, one of the things I learned when I... one of the last agencies I worked for was watching people that have been in the business for 20 years who still letterbox dropped, who still made the calls, they still did the work. Yeah. There's some things I think that in our business that haven't changed, and if you don't do the work, you won't get the result. What motivates you to do that? The work that is a grind sometimes. Those calls and that. Yeah. Look, I mean, I work. I love people, and I love getting the result. And I love property, and I love doing what I do. So there's that opportunity to help people, but you do have to kind of, just sit there and do the grind, and you have to remind yourself that it's the process, that gets the outcome. It's the activity that produces the result. So focus on that activity and focus on that process, and those results will come. So that's just really, remembering, and reminding yourself, and I've got Post-it notes everywhere, to tell you that that's what it is that's what you need to do. That's, I mean, I think Shane Beaumont preaches that, is that dollar productive activity. Yeah. Don't waste your time on, not doing those things. Yeah, and that's still an ongoing focus for me, I still, I love writing property blurbs. Well, I'm probably going to, looking at outsourcing that because I'll spend too much time on it. Yeah. I love producing the marketing content. Well, I can write the content really quickly, but I can get everybody to, I can get other people to reproduce that into different formats. So it's still an ongoing work in progress for me too. Yeah. 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 You mentioned before, well, obviously we're talking about the grind, and you mentioned before that, you're working longer hours in real estate than you ever did. How do you balance your life and... Oh, I shouldn't laugh, yes. Do you balance it? No. No. Look, if I'm honest, everyone around me would go no, so I'd have to say no. Look, I'm in the very fortunate position that about 4 years ago, my husband gave up his job to really kind of help me and, manage the boys and family life and all of that kind of stuff. Though I do say, occasionally I'd be better served by another wife. But, I love him to bits. He really tries. And I'm very, very lucky. He's a fabulous partner and a great dad and a brilliant support. So if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to do that. I do think, and I could be wrong, but, when I went into real estate, my boys were of that age where they were starting to be more focused on the world of men. And don't get me wrong, they still want me to be around, and there are times that, they'll, particularly if they're sick and, all that kind of stuff, they want mum. And I guess the great thing about real estate is you have the ability, to, in some ways control your hours. So, I can be there for things when they're at school and things that I want to be at. You've just got to be disciplined with that and, really, and ring fence all of that. And so I do get to be there for those things. But but you know, they are more interested in the world of men, and if they had their choice, you know, they'd rather take their, you know, their dad to something you know, now than their mum, which is a bit sad. But you know,
it'll
that
change.
Yes, yeah. Fortunately, my husband, you know, whilst my husband watches sport, he's not as across the soccer as I am. So I've had some beautiful moments in the last 2 weeks with my 15-year-old sitting on the couch watching the World Cup together, and I'm, you know, very strategic about those moments. And you know, like he had a camp the other week, and I said I'm picking him up after school, because one of the few places that boys talk is in the car when they're not looking at you. And so then I said, we'll get some food on the way, which stretches out that journey, and you know, the idea and the promise of junk food, you know, he's really happy. So we had this beautiful conversation in the car. So I've learned to be very strategic about how I get those moments with them, and making sure that I'm very present with them when I do that. But you do work really hard, and it is a constant challenge. I did take on a PA a couple of years ago, which was one of the best things that I ever did in terms of being able to kind of support me there. So that made a big difference. But you know, I'm the provider for our family. There is no plan B. So if I don't work, we don't eat, basically. So which is not a bad position to be in real estate. It keeps you motivated.
That's the motivation for the grind.
Yeah.
How do you define success for yourself?
You know, I guess this again, it was good to reflect on this. And for me, there's success at you know, lots of different levels. You know, at a micro level, I want to get the best result that I can for every property that I sell for that seller, because I know how important that is for them. So I've always been results oriented. From when I was very little at school, I was always very marks success driven, and that continues through to real estate. And real estate is very clear, you know, success measures in terms of the number. So for me, that's a blessing, because I've always been focused on getting the best, you know, doing my best work to get the best outcome. So that's a natural for me at real estate. At a more macro level, I guess it's being, you know, wanting to build a team, and you know, or a business, and we very much are our own businesses within an agency that's recognised at being the best at what we do, where the client is really at the centre of the process, but also, you know, community for me plays a big part of what we do too. So being really recognised as, you know, a leading expert in the area, you know, being an expert at real estate, but also being, you know, an expert at, you know, and the kind of go-to authority about where we live as well, you know, and helping people love where they live and making the most from the wonderful lifestyle that they get in our suburbs. I really do believe, and I guess this is another thing that comes back to when you're talking about the direction of the industry, I don't think being good is going to be good enough going forward. There's too many disruptors and other people trying to kind of break in. I think we're going to have to be really great, which is why I think that kind of professionalism is really important. We're going to have to be really exceptional at what we do and the results that we achieve for if we're going to survive as agents in an industry, and so that people can see that we really provide value. I just don't think there's going to be... I don't think there's ever been room for mediocrity. I don't think that lasts in our industry, but I don't think being good is going to be good enough. I think you have to really, you know, we really have to work towards being great. And look, for me personally, you know, I've got a lot of years left in this game. You know, I've got mortgages to pay, I've got school fees to pay. So I've got a lot of goals around family and finance and lifestyle. But in also, you know, growing the people that I work with and being able to give back to. You know, I'd like to think there'll be a day, and it's certainly not now and it's not in the near future, but, you know, way down the track where, you know, my role is really more about, you know, sort of mentoring and supporting a team. You know, I don't want to be the 900-pound gorilla. I guess. But really, I guess I'm getting more focused, and, you know, I talked about my husband's mum having passed away the other week, and we're just getting to that age where, you know, parents are getting elderly, and, you know, friends it gets sick and unwell, and it's really, I guess, making sure that, I'm living a life of gratitude and purpose. Really just that's about it, like doing great work, helping people, loving my family, and living life with gratitude and purpose.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Again. Thank you.
And I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Thanks for tuning into The Crunch. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show, so if you would like to share them, please email me at jess@cribcreative.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the show and share it with anyone else you think might like it.